having me. I work as an artist. So for me, well, I would say that it's the first time that I'm confronted to such a text also. And I was interested to try to think about a format as this presentation as a format in itself. So I want to relativize also for some style maybe into this communication, and also as only 30 minutes I will have to make some cuts. I hope it won't be too problematic. I entitled this communication Neighbors with Quarrels. And I will begin with the first quote from Nietzsche, which is about the origin of our concept of knowledge. And Nietzsche says, I picked this explanation up in the street where when I overheard a man of the people saying, he recognized me. With these words, I wonder what people understand at bottom by knowledge. What are they looking for when they seek it? Nothing other than to make something unfamiliar known. So according to Nietzsche, the origin of knowledge can be found in the will to master the foreign, to render it pre-existent, to make it already known. This assertion thus enjoins us to view knowledge as a tool for mastering and incorporating what is without. Nietzsche's remark places us from the outset before bifurcation. On the one hand is an epistemological path, that of the origin of knowledge. On the other, an anthropological path, that of our relation with the foreign. Rather than choosing to discuss just one of these paths, let's look at them in parallel. Perhaps we will realize that they end up meeting, or better yet, encroaching on each other's territory, giving rise to a possible ecological approach to artistic practices. Because what is of prime importance, I believe, is experience as a mixture of action and knowledge. Experience invites us to view knowledge as a practice of the self. And the first quarrel I would like to speak about is the quarrel of Utrecht. Since we are in Utrecht, we can overlook the role of the city in the history of knowledge. A history which recently saw major new developments. On 25 March 2005, the mayor of Utrecht and university officials co-signed a declaration rescinding the censorship to which Descartes had been subjected in 1642. Descartes had gone into exile in Holland, and he lived here for many years. It was here, in the city, that Descartes, soon to be the most influential intellectual of his time, the true precursor of modern age, was brought before the courts. In Cartesian reason, truth has only one criterion, the clear and distinct idea. One had to establish the evidence oneself, while at the same time preserving the role of God in whom Descartes believed. In Descartes, there are no quotation, but rather the elaboration of knowledge by means of mediation and practice of the self. In opposing the scholastic, Descartes was censored. This gave rise to what is known as the Quarrel of Utrecht, instigated by Gisbertus Votius, the rector of the University of Utrecht. And in the name of preserving the peace, Descartes' theses, suspected of atheism, were placed on the index by Europe's churches and kings. So please allow me, like Descartes, to doubt and to try to establish fruitful zones of uncertainty. For all certainty is, in fact, one of the problems posed for us by the exact science, the heirs of Cartesian reason, and more particularly the propagators of a system of the senses. Their approach is built only upon what they can isolate and reproduce. Scientific knowledge is constructed around certified invariables, the laws of nature. And Newton remains the reigning model despite quantum theory. So the first thing I would like to point out is how the term law here expresses science's pretension to establish a sort of parallel constitution to political laws. And as Ilya Prigozhin, the father of non-equilibrium physics, remarked, the ideals of physics were associated with certainty, with a denial of time and creativity. Further on, yet the world is not governed by laws, but neither it is ruled by chance. Physical laws correspond to a new form of intelligibility, expressed by irreducible probable representations. They are associated with instability, and they describe possible events without reducing them to deducible and determinable consequences of deterministic laws. For this Nobel Prize winner, we must therefore seek a third path between the determinism of blind law and the arbitrariness of chance. And now this part is called the quarrel of universals. And let's return to Descartes, who once invited Thomas Hobbes to read his work and to convey to him the objection he might have. And the English philosopher Hobbes, today viewed as the founder of modern political science, had numerous disagreements with the metaphysical meditation from Descartes. And his first objection was to Descartes' recycling of scholastic vocabulary. And as one commentator remarks, Hobbes believed that thoughts depended upon words which are mere convention of our imagination and sensation, in other words, of our perception of material reality. Words thus have only a very indirect connection to reality. They reflect it poorly sometimes, and at others not at all. As a good nominalist, he was unaware that naming something is often an opportunity wrongly to transform a concept proper to the human mind into a reality. The word essence is a good example of this. For Hobbes, to separate out the essence of a thing and its existence in this way was to play with words and make fiction a reality. Hobbes was taking his cue from a famous dispute in the early Middle Ages, which rehearsed the opposition between the realist Plato and the nominalist Aristotle. I just have to make a cut, so sorry. When he argued that experience alone was a sign of the reality of beings, Aristotle opened the door to relativist, nominalist thought. While the realist thesis was for a long time the dominant one, even the only one, it was questioned by Rosselin and Occam, so in the 11th century and the 14th century, who asserted that universals are above all abstractions. Hence, the quarrel of universals that Cartesians tried in vain to settle. But Hobbes was not just a nominalist, he has also been described as a naturalist philosopher. For him, experience is the only basis of all knowledge. The senses play a major role in his work, and the idea of the body politic runs through it. Didn't Hobbes, like his Leviathan, create a hybrid, blending nominalism and naturalism? So how can we approach the production of knowledge without shedding light on the concept of knowledge? For Borges, all knowledge has mythological origins, meaning, in the last resort, metaphorical origin. As somebody wrote about it, no one can function within his own system without translating and translation of meaning, without transference to other systems. All knowledge becomes metaphorical because all symbolic systems of representation find their origins in metaphor. In other words, they can be imputed to mythical sphere. For Borges, three mythologies run through our knowledge: the mathematical, the physical, and the lyrical. All three operate in the same translational way, even though their purposes are different. The first two have a cognitive objective, while the third, lyrical or poetic mythology, seeks affect. Borges thus invalidates any pretension to the veracity, objectivity, of generality of so-called certain forms of knowledge. Given the understanding both mythical and hypothetical that is imaginary figuration, he opts for an absolute aesthetics treatment of all knowledge. And take Foucault and his attempt to redefine knowledge in such a way that art and science could once again coexist without conflict. Right from the first chapter of his book, The Ecology of Knowledge, he calls for the creation of a new discursive order and wonders, is it possible to admit as they are the distinction between great forms of discourses or that of forms of genre which stand in opposition to science, literature, philosophy, religion, history, fiction, etc., and create all manner of Greek historic individualities. After all, literature and politics are recent categories. In every era, the distinction made are reflexive categories themselves created out of discourses, which deserve to be questioned. Rather than making distinction based on boundaries, shouldn't we be using a logic of overlapping? Is a question that I put after this. I will go to the next quarrel, the third one, which I call the quarrel of the ready-made. And in a fable entitled The Innkeeper and the Philosophers, Bertrand Russell also arrived at the conclusion that the question of universal is not simply a question of words, but is posed when one wishes to utter the utterances of facts. Our third historical quarrel, that of the ready-made, is founded on the same aporia as that of the quarrel of universal, with the exception that this time it concerned an action and not only theoretical jousting. For the ready-made is the veritable enactment of the quarrel of universal, enrolling it as a scenario of experience confronting words with objects. The basis of the ready-made's historical importance as knowledge is thus not only the artistic action of shifting the object towards a museum, it is precisely the fact that Duchamp puts nominalist precept to the test of reality and practice. He takes nominalism out of the realm of theoretical knowledge in order to act politically. His urinal, which is in principle is similar to thousands of others, which we would see as realism, is offered as irreducibly singular, which is nominalist theory. I hope it's a little bit clear because I had to cut some part about the explanation about nominalism, and I'm not sure it is really clear, but for I'm just going back to take an example because otherwise I'm not sure that you will get it. Let's take an example to illustrate these two doctrines. The realism thinks that, for example, the color red or the idea of species, for example, exists as universal, meaning that they form an ideal and that every object, every red object and every member of species are copies of reflection of this ideal. For the nominalist, red and species are only convention, words applied to objects, but without existence themselves. They are names without objective content, hence the term nominalism. So for nominalism, only singularities exist. So I would suggest that the ready-made has become what it is because it's the first gesture to open words and objects together beyond consecrated formats such as the book or the philosophical debate. The ready-made is an hybrid at once nominalist and realist. And now I would go into something which I call the artistic use of nominalism, or the poetic use of nominalism. From Duchamp's gesture to his later work and the work of surrealists such as Deneau, Léris, Magritte, and the Olympian Cano, or the conceptualist Plutarch's Kossuth, or even Philip Thomas, and right up to the irrealism of Nelson Woodman, artistic practice have created hybrids between nominalism and realism. And the realism I speak of here is to be understood as a discourse on being in the world. In other words, as a narrative of physical and sensory experience of life situation, while nominalism is always understood as a discourse on the fiction of the name of things. Once deemed irreconcilable, these two doctrines can only exist in concert, because the individual and subjectivist vision of nominalism is itself anchored in context located in times and space and mediated by experience and language. So for me, there is no doubt as to the existence of physical and sensory reality which exists outside discourse, even if this discourse is built on predicates. Nominalism usually comes to the rescue of an objection founded on realism, which holds that ideas, essence, and forms have a real existence and independence. In other words, realism objectifies nominalist theories which otherwise would be valid only as an incomplete illustrative model. The deep root of Aristotle's relative nominalism was experience. Perhaps a contemporary reading of this intermediary path would open a new way forward for us. A moderate nominalist philosopher such as Jan Hacking has demonstrated, moreover, that social construction and reality can coexist and develop simultaneously without too much conflict. Also, I suggest that Happy Warburg anthropological maxim, document experience, experience a document, might serve as a performative and transhistorical guide to this improbable realist relativism or realist nominalism. To document experience is to convey a being in the world with every means deemed useful. In this sense, everything has the potential to be a document. Constructions, objects, sculpture, writings, images. What transforms something into a document is the use to which it is put. The document is virtual, as Luc Baboulet has demonstrated also. And he says the document and the monument are closely connected, to the point that their status sometimes becomes confused or inverted. Neither is an essence or a quality, but rather something virtual. Anything can become document, anything can become a monument. Attributing a monumental value to something is a performative operation, which can affect our perception of an object at any time. Even if it was originally an unintentional monument, every monument is thus the product of an intention, even if this intention is removed in time. And Riegel described written monuments as possible monuments. The document calls for a gaze or action to be put into play, a use, an experience. In a book called The Ignorant School Teacher, Jacques Rancière quotes widely this revolutionary school teacher from France, exiled into Belgium in Leuven, which he was called Joseph Jacotot. And Jacotot says, our inability to tell the truth, even though we feel it, makes us speak like poets. Our inability to tell the truth, even though we feel it, makes us speak like poets, telling the stories of our spirits and confirming that they have been understood by others, adventurers communicating our feeling and seeing them shared by other sentient beings. Improvisation is the means by which human beings know themselves and confirm in their own minds that they are reasonable, meaning that they are animals which make words, figures, and comparison in order to recount what they think to others like them. And Rancière adds, the virtue of her intelligence lies less in knowing than in doing. Knowledge is nothing, doing is everything. But this doing is fundamentally an act of communication. For this reason, speaking is the best proof of an ability to do no matter what. In the act of speaking, we do not transmit knowledge, we render poetic. We convey and invite others to do the same. Making poetic, conveying and telling stories are modes of inhabiting a world which elude us that of language itself. And now I suggest that this point is entitled Becoming Irregular, an ecology of practice of the self. So I understand this binomial document of experience and experience of the document as one of the ways in which the Foucaultian énoncé function and is put to the test. And Foucault leaves aside the book and the work of art as close traditional discursive units. What is needed is a questioning beyond their limits. And beyond the theory of science, Foucault postulates a form of ecology. And by ecology I mean an operation of creating relations. So he postulates a form of ecology of discursive practices as the institution of reality as knowledge, and knowledge being the system of the visible and the sayable. So I try to consider the whole sentence. Foucault postulates a form of ecology of discursive practices as as the institution of reality as knowledge, subjected to constantly changing power relations. And Foucault sets himself up in the middle, arbitrating the nominalist-realist debate in a tactical manner. His meticulous analysis of discourse makes it possible to separate what belongs to realism, so things that they present themselves as real, from what belongs to nominalism, words which take on new meaning and create things. Perhaps it would be possible to imagine a mutual overlapping in the name of nominalism of the two unclassifiable thinkers, Foucault and Nelson Goodman. And this overlapping would operate around the consciousness of linguistic constructivism and the way in which it determines knowledge and thus our world. We might then think of artistic practices as subjects in their irreducible singularity, does this mean as documents of experience, and in their use of an already constructed calling obligatorily upon language as discursive tool, thus it means as experience of the document. This thinking produces its own ecology, and this ecology makes it possible to adapt scenarios for the fusion of art and life proposed by the avant-garde according to specific situation, to the here and now. The objective of artistic practices would therefore be to produce documents of experience, which would illustrate an approach to life and more precisely to everyday life, or what Achille Mbembe calls that privileged place where the subject experience is history. This assertion describing the post-colonial African subject finds a clear parallel in the extreme precariousness of the Western artist in the face of the laws and the marketplace and of the institutions. But it could potentially be applied to everyone on the planet. Gilles Deleuze, in his book Pour Parler, illustrates concisely this idea of existence as a work of art. He says it is a matter of inventing modes of existence, following optional rules capable of resisting power and of evading knowledge, even if knowledge tries to penetrate them and power to appropriate them. When we seek out new modes of existence, what is our artistic will irreducible to knowledge and power? The document of experience is precisely what makes it possible to question knowledge as power and power as knowledge from an irregular position in terms of scientific knowledge. Artists teach others what they don't know because knowledge is only produced in the translational practice of the self. Artistic practices function as a clinamen in the constitution of recognized knowledge. They make possible parallel words which upset or even invalidate certain forms of knowledge. The performative role of artistic practices thus enacts our relation to our common and unpredictable other, what science or exact sciences leaves unthought. We are all experts. Until now I've been evasive about the concept of experience. But artists, like anyone who carries out an activity, can claim the status of an expert, a word whose meaning Isabelle Stengers and Bernadette Bensaud-Vincent has shown has been inverted because they say the expert is someone with experience, experiencia in Latin. This primary meaning founded on the idea of learning through practice, through the common experience of life and one's trade, has been eclipsed by the more common meaning today of a specialist in a field. This semantic evolution is remarkable in that the modern meaning tends to disqualify the ordinary experience at the root of the initial concept. Artistic practices see themselves, or maybe I see them, as the production of irregularities of knowledge, the visible and the sayable, which have the force of law. And Deleuze remarks, we cannot solve the problem of knowledge by invoking a correspondence or a conformity between saying and seeing. We must look elsewhere for the reason that intersects them, which ties them to each other. In other words, we must invent the optional rules he spoke of above, The rules which make it possible to denounce the space-times in which the fiction of the law, with a big L, prevents a community from conceiving itself in its plural aspect. Artistic practices negotiate that what escapes the laws, which fix the order of things, the unforeseeable and the unpredictable, but also the invisible and the unsayable. Because what cannot claim to be true is rejected on the side of the false and the counterfeit, artistic practice became the pragmatic model of production of knowledge. They act upon the world rather than explaining it. They undo it in order better to appropriate it. Becoming artists are becoming outlaws. Their archetypal figure is an in-between figure, the unartist. This word is from Duchamp, the unartist. The artist is a relay posted on our borders, an overlapping figure. Art, Marcel Schwab remarks, is the opposite of general ideas. It describes only the individuals and seeks only the unique. It does not classify, it declassifies. Just check. Can you say? There was a part called Duchamp in the Congo, from the ready-made to the ready-mix, but I will have to shorten this also. And
I want to hear it.
Okay, so, but I want to speak a little bit about my practice at the inside. So I will say, in the Voyage of Duchamp au Congo, the Congolese artist Thomas Muteba Lutumbwe, which is a Congolese artist living in Belgium, has written an opening scene that could be incorporated into the script by Bruno Latour in Nous n'avons jamais été modernes. So it's a book from Latour. And I said that this small story from, this small text from Muteba Lutumbwe could serve as an opening act. Because Lutumbwe writes, Duchamp's aesthetics comes from Africa. During an imaginary journey to the Belgian Congo at the turn of the 20th century, Marcel Duchamp was laid bare by his anonymous African teachers. They taught him how to make ironic and absurd objects. All these works were made in the style of African mask. In a conception of art which holds that any object can play the role of a mask as long as it is designed as such. Fontaine, from 1917, an upturned urinal is seen by African as his most beautiful mask. The mask should not be understood here as an object worn in front of the eyes to hide the face, but rather like the Guinean hui or pondo, as something chosen arbitrarily or found and repositioned to express a series of ideas or invisible things. And Isabel Stenger's Cosmopolitics incorporates it in a critical manner, I believe, some of Bruno Latour's most significant ideas. Her concept rethinks the coexistence of humans and things in a non-disqualifying way, but which at the same time avoid the insipidity of tolerance. Is it possible, that's my question, to reconcile invisible beings like genies with fractals? If we consider that contemporary artistic practices cannot avoid the terms of the cosmopolitical debate, and that in addition there can be no knowledge, whether cognitive or narrative, without translation and thus without metaphor, then this is the same as thinking about artistic practices as being directly political, in a twofold relation with alterity. Twofold because in relation to its own individual alterity, or own multiplicity, and not only in relation with the alterity of the other. This invitation by Foucault, Deleuze, and Barthes and others to go beyond humanism and to liberate the spheres of experience, like philosophy, history, art, and so on, which has been reformulated today at the limit of science, philosophy, anthropology, and ethnopsychiatry by Latour, Stengers, and Tobin-Nathan, is one possible way of resisting the cannibalism of the marketplace and of reconfiguring a shared plural world. And by following the trail of symmetrical anthropology advanced by Bruno Latour, we approached arts and science as spaces of translation, as producer of what he calls fetish, which is a contraction between fact and fetish. And in art, we could also call them ready mixes to indicate their having descended from Duchamp, the way they reinvest reality with experience. The use of the ready mix would therefore provide a field of action and discussion conducive to the hybridization of artistic practice and thus to their desacralization. I had a short part also to explain what was my idea of ready mix, but I don't have time to talk about it. So I would say that the artist critic is obviously not limited to the aesthetic of critical realism. The narrative enactment is thus revealed to be an operation which opens onto fiction as a form of politics in itself. The document of experience is always a narrative, whatever form it takes: visual art, theater, literature, cinema. And as Walter Benjamin remarked, unlike information, narrative is not concerned with transmitting the purity of the event in itself. It incorporates it into the life itself of the person relating it in order to communicate it, like his own experience, to the person listening. The narrator thus leaves his trace, like a potter's hand on the clay vase. And some art is conscious of the narrative, constructivist and subjectivist dimension of any document, have perfected protocols for working with the real intention with documentary style. Some artists opposed to the academism of a format relatively pleased with itself attempt therefore to reconsider space-time and its heterogeneous, superimposable and simultaneous nature. This is the case in particular with critical works which we draw here and there a new cartography of creation in keeping with cosmopolitical ideas. And narrative, Jean-Christophe Royou, a French critic, remarks, is thus what makes possible the reciprocal reconstruction of social bonds and private experience. Today, in order to conceive of reality, the factual is therefore often mixed with the fictional. This translation of experience enables the viewer to problematize the facticity of reality itself, the system of things hidden behind words. Alongside this work based on the document, is that which is created in the first place around the pole of experience. And the Ambassade Universal Embassy, a project which was an autonomous group of illegal immigrants and citizens based in Brussels, in which I participated between 2001 and 2005, illustrates how this question of irregular becoming and the document of experience can be methodological tools for thinking about the possible ecology of artistic practices. Now I have a few images. The former colonial, and now this small part is called the return of the quarrel, the return to the quarrel of universals. But you can launch it, it's okay. The former colonial powers are now discovering incredulous the fragility of the universals, republicanism and universalism. Alongside their difficult relation with their immigrants, there are those strange effects of neoliberalism called migratory flows. Excuse me. These other people, crystallize every discussion, criminalize from the very moment they are termed illegal. Usually in the plural, these new immigrants pose serious questions to Europe. Liberalism as a new universal has taken its place among Europeans, who are advised to abandon their tradition, to miscegenate, to officialize multiplicity, the same things they once imposed by force on their colonies. Republics are suffering from their sham egalitarianism and their armchair universalism. The Ambassade Universelle, the Universal Embassy, is still today inhabited in Brussels. In 2001, this very peculiar residence, it is the former embassy of Somalia, a disintegrated country. It was renamed. It is both real and fictive, and indistinctly so. It is inhabited and to be inhabited. In a state of emergency, citizens and illegal immigrants collectively conferred upon it a concrete, everyday and irregular use to house illegal immigrants in the process of obtaining their papers. Within the Ambassade Universelle are ordinary people from around the world. More than 20 nationalities have been represented through the years, illegal migrants with the most diverse backgrounds: students, teacher, farmer, mechanic, policeman, actor, top-level athlete, scholar, and also citizens from every walk of life: unemployed, welfare recipients, artists, activists, academics. The Ambassade Universelle is based on autonomy and mutual assistance. Mutual assistance in everyday community life, in knowledge based on the practice of law, and finally in the constitution of power symbolized by a place which represents people with no representation. An embassy, please recall, is a symbol of an individual's representation abroad. This embassy is a symbol of many people at home. We might describe it as a form of collective giving voice, or the constitution of a collective subjectivity. The project developed as the law increased the categories of clandestinity, because in laws, as well as in science, and now I quote Isabelle Stengers, the law poses the problem of what seems to violate it. We might ask ourselves then what a performative definition of fiction might be. And Etienne Balibar, a French philosopher, has given one full of possibilities. Fiction, he says, is the production of reality out of experience itself, in which knowledge and action are inseparably joined. It is an insurrection leading to constitution and the transformation of existing constitution. Undoubtedly, the most important thing to the reinvention of politics in today's world, as personal responsibility and as a schema for communication among groups, is to find the sites of fiction through experience. For Balibar, one of the sites of fiction par excellence is the border. This is precisely what the Ambassade Universelle endeavored to forge, an alternative experience of the border. Through this experience, participants attempted to forge a minor fiction which, on the basis of its political representativeness, could address a major fiction, the fiction of the law, with a big L. And as Michel Foucault remarks, a fiction alone can make people believe that laws are made to be respected and that police and the courts are made to enforce them. Only a theoretical fiction can make people believe that we are subscribing once and for all to the laws of the society to which we belong. Everyone knows that the laws are made by some to be applied to others. So a project such as the Universal Embassy is an hybrid of all energies and actors who made it possible. The migrant and the resident find themselves with the shared concern to give order to the chaos caused by the law in this case. They counter it with their embassy, a tool of resistance and invention, a veritable cosmos, to use Joyce's term, and this meaning was the composition of a cow, the ordering of the irregular according to concepts to be invented upon reading the situation and not according to preconceived laws. As a thoroughly hybrid collective project, the embassy questioned artistic practices with respect to the invention and organization of a living and performative form of autonomous representation. This is a form of cosmopolitics.